Hey guys, Troy Francis here with another video, and today I'm in Manchester, by the way, beautiful sunny Manchester, and I wanted to talk a bit about childhood trauma and how it relates to your relationships later in life. And the short TLDR answer to that is it relates a lot, okay? Childhood trauma of any kind is gonna affect the way that you interact with other human beings significantly. And I know for myself that when I look back on my life and I think back on things that happened in my own childhood, they have massively impacted on the way that I behave, the way that I treat other people, the way that I connect with other people, and so on and so forth. Now, that's not to blame. I don't think. Put it this way: terrible things happen to people, and terrible things happen to people when they are very young and they are defenseless and they have no option in the matter. Okay, my childhood, and I'm not going to go into details here, was psychologically pretty difficult at times. Okay, my childhood was not as, if you want to measure it in these terms, it was not as bad. I mean, I've heard some terrible things about terrible physical abuse and indeed sexual abuse from people that I've met, and from obviously people that you hear about in the media and so on. And I was fortunate in that I didn't suffer to those excesses. Nevertheless, there was certainly very psychologically traumatic incidents that happened and were ongoing, okay, throughout the entirety of my childhood, all right? And has that affected me as a person? 1,000%, right? And when you look back on, or when I look back on my life, it's very easy to plot a very clear trajectory from basically being somebody who was living in a very repressed sort of middle class home up until the age of 18, and then moving to Manchester where we are now, and having the brakes taken off and just going completely fucking nuts, and really going nuts for an entire decade. So for the rest of my 20s, going completely insane as far as the drink was concerned, as far as the drugs was concerned, promiscuity, fucking around, getting into all sorts of dodgy situations, and basically fucking up my life, really. And you know, when you look at it, I didn't really consider this at the time, but when you look at it, it's pretty clear, really, that was as a direct consequence. It was a direct response, albeit unconscious, from me to what had happened to me prior. Okay, it was this like fuck you to the world. So right, I'm gonna just do what I want, and more than that, I'm going to destroy myself in the process, and I don't care. Okay. Fortunately, or unfortunately for you guys, I didn't destroy myself. I lived, and I changed the way that I lived. You know, I moderated my behaviour. Right. I went into recovery. I became a very different kind of person, and yeah, things changed for me. Things worked out for the most part pretty well, but that's not to say that I don't still have those same impulses. I don't still have those same issues that plagued me when I was a younger man. It's just that the way that I dealt with them when I was in my 20s, when I first sort of reached adulthood, was to turn to drinks, to turn to substances, to turn to drugs, okay? And I did a lot of that in this city where we're sitting now, okay? In saying all of that, I'm not certain that it's correct to blame one's adult behaviour on people, things that happened to us when we were younger. I don't think that's the right thing to do either. I think for a start, forgiveness is an important thing, and not just in a virtuous sense. I think it's psychologically important to forgive and to move on. And secondly, we have to take responsibility, right? We have to take, as we're adults, right? We have to take responsibility for the things that we do. Anyway, nevertheless, with all of that being said, are there things that happened in your childhood that affect the way in which you relate specifically to women and in dating? Quite possibly, yes, okay? And that can manifest itself in a number of different ways, including, and this is the most common one that we find, sexual shame. So guys can be very sort of ashamed about their sexuality, about relating in a sexual way. And a way to think about this is, are you comfortable being sexual or expressing sexuality with a woman that you are attracted to? And if you're not, then you are suffering from some species of sexual shame, and that might be tied back to something that happened to you earlier on. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about terrible abuse or anything like that. It could be something very small. It could be, you got rejected by somebody, you had a bad experience. It could be some very, very small thing. Nevertheless, is it worth going to therapy, or is it worth getting some counselling to get that stuff sorted out, or to at least try to work through some of those issues? I would say yes. However, and this is the important thing, because people will sometimes say, people will talk about therapy, right? And they'll say, okay, well, I want to learn game, I want to get better with women, I want to get a girlfriend, I want to have a harem, or whatever it is you want to do. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into therapy because I need to sort my issues out, which is fine in theory, but the problem is that you could spend years laying on some psychologist or psychiatrist's couch talking about stuff, and it may help you in some ways. It probably will help clear away the wreckage of the past, but it's not going to make you into a Casanova, right? It's not going to suddenly turn you into Leonardo DiCaprio, because you're still going to go to the club, and you're still going to feel awkward, and you're still not going to be socially equipped to deal with, the slings and arrows of all of that. So this is how it was for me. I was carrying a lot of unresolved trauma around with me for a long time, really into my 30s. And I got into a relationship with somebody. The relationship didn't last. We weren't really compatible, but she did at the time encourage me to sort of go into therapy. And so I did a bit of googling around, and I tried a bit of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which I just felt a little bit superficial. It didn't seem to really be hitting the spot for me at that time. So I didn't pursue that. But then I found a guy who was a very classic sort of psychologist. You'd go to his place, you'd lay on the couch for 50 minutes and talk, and he would sit there and make notes and ask a few questions and give a few prompts. And I worked with him for a decent amount of time. We're talking several years. 5 years, 6, 7 years, on and off, a long time, right? I was in therapy for. And I talked about everything that had happened to me, all of the childhood stuff, all of the stuff that had happened in adolescence, going into all of the stuff that had happened in my young adulthood, up to the present day. And then going round and round like a washing machine, going back and forward, talking about the stuff. And did it help? Yes, massively. And but in regard to my dating life, I think it helped in two main ways. The first way it helped was that it lifted a weight. Okay, so I was carrying around a lot of emotional weight with me. All right, and that would manifest itself not in regular social situations, and also in dating situations. Because to be quite frank, when you're in the club, and you're sort of like you're trying to have a fun time, and you're trying to chat with the ladies and all that kind of stuff. If you're carrying around this big psychological weight, people can feel that, and that's not very attractive, really. Okay, and it was dragging me down. So I was able to alleviate that to a large extent, and also just with friends and things as well. I was able to, and I got to a point where, because I talked about all this stuff, and a lot of the stuff that had happened as a kid, I'd never really talked about to anybody before. And I talked about it all with this therapist, and so then I felt free to, if people brought up the childhood things, I felt free, and now I can just have a regular conversation with somebody, and I can just say, yeah, this happened, that happened, and it doesn't really affect me because I've already talked it all out, if you like. Whereas I think before it would have been very hard for me to talk about those things because it was the wound hadn't been healed, if you like. I hadn't sort of. It's almost like I'm trying to think of a decent analogy. Imagine having a splinter under the skin, right? And if you touch it, it hurts because the splinter is still there. So you have to remove the splinter, and then it starts to heal, and then you can touch it again. And it's not as painful because the splinter's been removed. So the therapy was removing the splinter. So there was still probably maybe some pain there, and maybe there even still is, like a small bruise or something. But in general, the pain is gone because the actual splinter's been removed. So it was kind of like that, okay? But what it didn't do, and this I think is an important message, what it didn't do in itself was suddenly make my game, stellar or amazing or anything like that. Because it's not enough just to remove the childhood trauma. It's not enough just to become at peace with the things that happened to you in the past, because that's one thing, and it's good to do that, but that's not going to help you become a superstar socially, okay? That's not going to help you become, a Riz god, right? That's just removing something that, ideally wouldn't have been there in the first place, okay? So it's helpful to do, but what I would encourage anybody watching this who maybe resonates with this, and perhaps you've got a similar kind of a thing going, in your own life, what I would encourage you to do is to, yes, look at therapy, yes, look at ways in which you can work through some of these things that have happened to you, but also, you also want to be practicing your social skills at the same time, because time is passing, right? And none of us are getting any younger, and it's like when guys say, oh, well, should I work on my business and then I'll get good at game, or I'll get good at dating when I've spent 10 years working on my business. It's like, well, I mean, you could do that, but you're going to be 10 years older and you're still going to have no social skills, and you're going to be at a disadvantage. What we really need to do is to be doing all of it at the same time. So if you are carrying trauma from the past, or you know that there's unresolved stuff from the past that you feel that is harming you in some way, or maybe it's keeping you awake at night, or it's just, you can feel it weighing on you as you're interacting with other people, then by all means I would encourage you to seek out therapy. I mean, I'm sure there are people in the manosphere who would disagree with this. Oh, it's all like nonsense, just go to the gym. I personally think that's bollocks. I mean, go to the gym as well, yeah, sure, but I think some of this stuff needs to get talked out. I think talking therapy is very, very valuable, okay? But you've also got to work on the other stuff. You've also still got to go to the gym. You've still got to practice talking to women, right? You've still got to practice talking to other dudes. You've got to practice being social. You've got to work on your finances. You've got to work on your staff. The burden of performance is always going to be on us as guys, right? But we've got to do all of it, okay? So is therapy a good thing? Yes. Is it going to solve all of your problems? No, okay? At best, it's going to help to alleviate some of the additional suffering that you've had on top of the basic existential suffering that you're going to have anyway, which is like, oh shit, I'm living in this cruel, callous, strange, hyper-real world of TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and AI, and I can't get a girlfriend. So you're going to have that level of sort of psychic pain. It's still going to be there anyway regardless, and then you've got the other level. So you may as well deal with the first level, which is the childhood trauma stuff, but it's not going to help you with the second level. To get good with the second level, you're going to have to basically learn social skills, okay, which is what we teach. So we've got a boot camp coming up, we've got a VIP experience coming up in London in September. You can join us on that, information below. We've got events coming up in Mexico and in Colombia in October as well. So if you'd like more information, just email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com, or DM me on Twitter or on Instagram @realtroyfrancis, and get in touch and drop me your WhatsApp details, and I will give you a call and we can talk about the possibilities. Anyway, give me a like on the way out, give me a comment beneath, and please do subscribe to this channel. I'll see you again very soon. Bye.